Hi, everybody. Sorry, it's me. It's not supposed to be me. It's supposed to be Simon now. But we have a small issue. I'm just going to bring him in now, and then I'll go away. Back in a second.
Hi. Welcome. I'm talking to you from London, where it's not a great day. It's, as you say in Ireland, lashing. Anyway, we're going to have a fantastic hour as ever. I'm thrilled to say that we are joined today by the internationally best-selling crime writer, Catherine Ryan Howard, who is in conversation with another internationally best-selling crime writer, Sam Blake. So, two fun facts I want you to keep in mind for the next hour. Firstly, Catherine wants to be a NASA astronaut when she grows up. And secondly, she once worked for Walt Disney. So clearly very important elements to bear in mind. But seriously, this is really exciting because Catherine's debut novel in 2016, Distress Signals, was a bestseller on both sides of the Atlantic and was hailed as a highly confident and accomplished debut novel, impeccably sustained with not a false note. It was shortlisted for the CWA John Creasey New Blood Dagger Award and also for the Irish Book Awards Crime Novel of the Year. She followed that 2 years later with The Liar's Girl, and this was a finalist for the Mystery Writers of America Edgar Award, and this is often talked about as the kind of Oscars of that community. It's an accolade previously won by Rankin and Raymond Chandler and, would you believe, Stephen King. And that was included in the Guardian's list of 50 great thrillers by women written since 1945. A mere year later, we were treated to Rewind, which debuted at number 2 on the Irish bestseller chart and was again shortlisted for the Irish Crime Novel of the Year and is being developed for television. The Nothing Man, I think, was out in August of this year. This has an absolutely brilliant hook to it, and I suspect we're going to hear a little bit more about that in the next hour. It was published on both sides of the Atlantic and debuted at number 1 again in the Irish bestseller list. So that's enough for me. I am really, really thrilled to welcome Catherine Ryan Howard and Sam Blake.
Hi, am I in? I am. Sorry, I'm just going to bring Catherine in now. Sorry, just as well, the writing is a bit more seamless than the technology here this morning. Just give me a second. Catherine's counting in now. There we go. Says Catherine. Thank you so much, Simon. That's a brilliant introduction. I am going to remove you now, and you can listen to us while we have a little chat. There we go. Right now, sorry, it all went a bit pear-shaped there because I had too many pictures along the bottom of the screen to bring you in all at the same time. Delighted you were able to join us on the writing game this morning.
Thank you, and I think Simon should do all my introductions because I'm happy to listen to that all the time.
Very impressive list altogether. So we're broadcasting to Facebook on the writing.ie page, and we're broadcasting to YouTube on the writing.ie YouTube page. And obviously he was talking there about the success of the various books, and particularly The Nothing Man, which is out now. So we have what we do during the course of the broadcast. Perfect. Right on cue. I love that comment. During the course of the broadcast, we'll be dropping the links in your social media links for people to follow you, and also the buy links for Amazon. So if there's anybody new who doesn't already have it, they can pick it up during the course of this hour. But let me take you right back, Miss Howard, to the very beginning, to where you started writing and how you found your passion, I suppose. Take me right back to the first book.
I mean, we'd have to go back way before the first book because you know this about me. I always wanted to be a writer. I work with a picture on my desk of me, like about 8 years old, typing away on the typewriter that I asked Santa to bring me. I just always wanted to be a writer, and when I finally understood that like books just didn't appear, that people wrote them and that was their jobs, I was like, that's what I want to do, and I never strayed from that. But for many years, I think a lot of people will probably relate to this. I went to all the workshops, met you at one of them, read all the books, listened to all the advice, but I never actually did much with any writing. And it turns out that that's like a crucial part of the published author. And what I realized now looking back is that I just never really had a good idea for a novel. Like, you know, I was always writing like the first 3 chapters of something, and then it would kind of just fizzle out and fade out. And also I was trying to write what I thought would get me published, quite cynically. You know, I thought if I wrote sort of women's commercial fiction or something, that would be easier to get published than crime, which is crazy, because crime fiction. I always mean crime fiction. Crime is what I love and what I read and what I have read all my life. And, you know, as soon as I started writing that, there was like an audible click almost, and I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing, and it's what I should have been doing all along.
Yeah, it's a really interesting turning point, that, isn't it? Like, you know, you wrote the we won't go right the way back because otherwise we haven't got time. There's too many books. But you wrote the Mouse Pact Disney memoir, and you got that out there and built yourself in terms of social media. But it was that realization that you should be writing what you were reading and what you really loved that made the difference.
I mean, I was really happy to write Mousetrap. So Mousetrap was a lighthearted.
I love that book. So good.
Thank you, but a long time ago now. It was a lighthearted travel memoir about the year and a half I spent working in Walt Disney World. And I sent it around to some agents and editors, and they all said the same thing, which was like they enjoyed reading it, but there was no market for a book like that. At that time, 2010, self-publishing was just kind of shedding its like deluded loser box under the stairs type of thing, and you could publish to Kindle, you could do print on demand, and so I put it out there and it did really well, but it was very much like right time, right place, and I really enjoyed it and I feel very proud of what I did, but at the same time I knew it was never going to get me like my dream. Like, I didn't grow up dreaming of seeing a book on a Kindle because I put it there. I wanted books in bookshops. I wanted the whole, you know, making a living as a writer. And the way to get that was traditional publishing. So I kept pursuing that. But it kept me I often say it kept me in the ink and coffee that I needed to actually write it.
Indeed. Well, it did great, and also it taught you hugely about marketing and about understanding the book business, and it got you into because you were working as a publicist with Penguin at one point, weren't you too? So it opened lots of doors.
I was doing social media campaigns for them, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, it actually opened lots of doors. So I think there's never a word wasted with writing, is there? It's always
The thing is, like, you have this idea in your head that you want to get from A to B, and you think the journey there will be a straight line. But it's not, it's squiggly.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, all sorts of stuff was going on in the years between like writing and self-publishing Mousetrap and my finally getting a traditional book deal. And there was lots of times I felt like so far away from where I needed to be. But actually looking back, I was getting closer and closer all the time. And that's what I often say to people. If, you know, this is what they really, really want, your goal should be to start moving closer to it. Like, there's so many things you can do just to be closer to books. You could work in a bookshop, you could get a job in publishing, you could self-publish, you could start a website about writing. Like, there's so many things you can do that aren't the eventual destination, but will help you get there, I think.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. It's a case of, it's like pushing open all those doors, isn't it? Unless you're in the right space and you're making those moves, things aren't going to happen. You know, if you're sitting in your garret not writing, or doing, you know, or going to all the workshops but not actually writing, it's really a case of trying to open all those doors. So then bring us up to Distress Signals, because you had one of the things about your books is they're very high concept. You have corkers of ideas. I mean, they're absolutely superb. So take us back to Distress Signals and how that idea came and how you flipped into writing the crime.
So my mom loves me telling the story. So my mom used to, like, you know, she went to a cafe or something and someone had left a newspaper or a magazine and she read it and she thought there was something that, you know, would interest you, she'd bring it home, right? And there was never, like, her level of interest versus my level of interest was never
Quite
even
the same. Yeah.
But one day she, you know, I forgave all because she came home with a copy of the Guardian Weekends magazine, and the cover story was Lost at Sea by John Ronson. So it's about a Disney cast member, which is Disney speak for employee, who went missing from one of the Disney cruise ships, and that's why she brought it, because of the Disney connection. But while I was reading it, this phrase jumped out at me: International Cruise Victims Organization, and it stopped me in my tracks. Like, I still have the magazine, and there's a yellow circle around it with highlighter, because I had never been on a cruise. I didn't know anything about them, but I assumed like the worst thing that could happen to you is that you would get norovirus. There's a different worst thing that can happen to you now, but we won't say the word.
Yeah.
I thought like food poisoning was as bad as it was going to get. So I was like, victims of what? And why is there so many of them that they need to organize? And I started Googling, and there was also a statistic in that article, which I don't think had been verified, but it said that the average cruise ship has a sexual crime rate 50% higher than the average American city. So because of this loophole in maritime law, when a cruise ship is in international waters, and I won't go on about this too long, even though it's my specialist subject.
Fascinating, yeah.
But when a cruise ship is in international waters, it's due to the way maritime law works, you're basically in a country where there is no police. And would you ever go on holiday to a lawless country? I certainly wouldn't. So after doing this research, I came to the conclusion that if I was a serial killer, a cruise ship would be a great place to hunt for victims, because there's plenty of them and you're probably not going to get caught. And that's where the idea for Distress Signals was born.
It was brilliant. So clever. And you wrote that book and you sent it out.
Mm-hmm. You make it sound very like I just did it.
Just did it. Yeah, no, there was a few. I know it was a bit of a
while, because I was I think a year I had 30,000 words and I just couldn't get past them. And the reason was, I know now, was fear, because I was still in a place where everything I wanted might be mine, but if I sent out this book, I could get told, you can't do this, like, forget this. So I was stalling and procrastinating, but eventually I did finish it and sent it out.
And got to the, and it's just, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting that's what was holding you back at that point. Because now, you know, for anybody listening in who sees these 4 incredibly successful books, which have all been nominated for awards, and you know, generally that right back then fear was holding you back, and that happens to everybody. It's not something that, you know. It really is. It's a writer issue, I think, isn't it? So, so Distress Signals went out to Julie, and you sent it to Jane Gregory, who is now your agent. And she loved it, and that was all great, and it all went swimmingly from there, really, didn't it? Because it sold very well.
It really did, no pun intended.
Indeed.
Yeah, so Jane Gregory, who represents like Val McDermott and basically like all these amazing crime writers, female crime writers, she has an in-house editor. So for 6 months, we did another draft of the book. So it was like,
that's really interesting. That's really interesting for people that it, you know, it still needed work, and it was still, yeah.
Like, someone said to me years ago, don't count on anyone else seeing your potential in terms of books. And what she meant was, like, don't assume that someone is going to read your book and say, with a little bit more work,
find that grain of genius.
It needs to be as good as it can be right now. And that's Jane's philosophy, really. So worked on it for another 6 months, and it went out on submission on a Thursday, and at 1:01 on Monday, 23rd of March 2015.
Ooh, you good memory.
Only because it's the biggest moment of my entire life. I got the call saying that we had a preempt for a 2-book deal with your publisher and mine.
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, it was kind of crazy, but of course it all happened so quick after like 10 years of desperately trying to make it happen, you know.
Absolutely. No, it's great. One of the things I want to get into is your plotting and your planning process. So in terms of the other books, then Rewind followed, I'm going to get them in the wrong order.
Rewind,
The Liar's Girl's next. And that's one I had to take off the screen to get you on because there wasn't enough space. But Rewind, I'm just going to show them quickly the covers. So that's Distress Signals, awesome cover, with your nomination thing on it too. And this is the Rewind cover, because this is another brilliant idea. Hang on, that's going to go to the bottom. There we go. So that's another high concept. I mean, because Distress Signals is when we talk about high concept books, we're talking about books where the plot can be delivered in one line. So it's very serial killer on a cruise ship.
Yeah. And I always use the words inherent appeal when we're talking about high concept. Inherent appeal is an idea where no one has to read the book to understand that it's a good idea. Another great example, Jurassic Park. So if I say dinosaurs brought back, put on an island, it's a theme park, I don't need to make you read a book or watch a movie for you to say, oh, I can see what's going to happen immediately. That's a great idea. Let's go. So I always try to have high concept ideas with inherent appeal, because so many decisions, both in the run up to publication and then with readers when the book is out there, are made like that. So you just don't have, like, oftentimes, and my heart breaks them, but when I meet aspiring writers, you know, and I'm like, what's your book about? And they're like, well, you know, like, settle in. It's about a girl and she goes here and then, and I'm like, no. I need to know in like 30 to 50 seconds what your book is about. Like, so that's, I always try and do that, because I think a lot of the work then, in terms of trying to promote the book and get people to read the book and all that sort of stuff, is helped along by that.
Yeah, it's definitely in that line. Is that in terms of you selling it to your agent then taking it to publisher taking it to marketing, and it
really, really easy, because it came from an image, a post secret image, which is like a community art project where people write their deepest, darkest secrets on a postcard, and they mail it to this guy called Frank Warren, and he puts it online. So it was a picture of a bedroom, and the secret was, I trade hidden sex cam videos with other Airbnb hosts. Yeah, exactly. Kind of children, I think about it. So I saw that. I was staying in a hotel at the time, thankfully, not an Airbnb. And I thought, what if you were doing that and you got more than you bargained for? Like, what if you captured a murder on one of your tapes or one of your recordings? You can't report it without revealing your own criminality. And that's where Rewind was. It's
that fundamental moral dilemma, isn't it? And I think if you've got a moral dilemma in a book, it always gives it a lot of push. So yeah, no, it's a genius concept. I'm going to bring in the next one now. There's a bit of fiddling going on here. Sorry, we do.
It looks very impressive though. So
are you impressed with this technology thing? I mean, we completely messed up the beginning now, and not being able to, anyway. So there we go. So the next book. So this brings us to the Liars Girls, the cover I've lost, and that was one that was called the Edgar. So anyway, you have to Google that. You can click on the link and then you'll be able to see it. It should pop up in the comments. So The Nothing Man is the one that's out now. This is a key one to talk about, because this again is another high concept. So tell us what the pitch is for that. And then we'll
The Nothing Man, in its simplest form, is half a true crime memoir that I made up, and half the killer's reaction to it as he reads. So I read Michelle McNamara's I'll Be Gone in the Dark a week after Joseph James D'Angelo was arrested in California. Like, it was incredible to read that book, knowing who he was and having...
He's the Golden Gate Killer, just to say.
Killer, yeah. Which we thought, like, maybe we would never find out who did it. It had been decades since his last crime. And the more I read her book, the more I thought it was a #1 New York Times bestseller. He was still living in the area where the crimes occurred. And we know from when he was active that he paid very close attention to his own press. Did he read the book?
Obviously.
I thoroughly believe he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was his reaction to it? So I'm very interested in, doing something new. I think novel means new, and you should strive to create something new when you write a novel. So I decided to actually push the whole true crime memoir inside The Nothing Man. I have a copy here, and so I'll show you. You open it to my book, and the first scene is Jim, who is the Nothing Man and is now elderly, and well, not elderly, but he's
retired.
Where elderly begins, but he's in his 60s, and he's working as a security guard in a supermarket, and he discovers the book about him, and he picks it up, and you turn the page, and you are now reading
The Nothing Man.
The Nothing Man, and it has its own copyright and dedication, and it's in a different font. And what I love is that on the Nothing Man pages, it says, I can't do this, took the wrong direction, it says Eve Black at the top. So you and Jim, aka the Nothing Man, are reading the book about him at the same time.
It's a really, really brilliant concept. And now we're several books on. You've always been a plotter, all the way through all the books, and have quite a unique process. So this is a real challenge to plot, because you're plotting effectively 2 books. So just take us through, for anybody who is wanting to go for this high concept and write this amazing book, but take us through your plotting process.
It's all built around procrastination. It's all built around what will take the longest. How can I delay actually writing books? So it involves, it used to involve a lot of Post-its. Now I go more for an Excel spreadsheet. And if anyone looks at my Instagram, I think I have the one from Rewind up there, which was like ferociously color coded and all this. But basically, I go by kind of screenwriting principles. So I cannot sit down and just write, no, I have to write 100,000 words and try to get there somehow. I have to have goalposts along the way. So I immediately split the book into 4 parts: Act 1, Act 2, Part 1, Act 2, Part 2, Act 3. And I have a midpoint right in the middle where something huge happens. And I decide what those things are before I begin. So I think it's much easier to say, well, I have 10,000 words to get to the bit where she finds the car or whatever it is. And that's how I break down the process. I've used like all variations of that at times, but now I'm just very much like, pick out the big parts and then go for it. Strangely though, The Nothing Man, I barely had to plot. It just came out. I don't think that will ever happen again. It's a very special book to me. I think it was sort of a singular writing experience, and now I'm in the first draft of book 5, and I'm realizing, nope, it doesn't get easier. That was an anomaly. I'm back to it being,
I was going to say, it's experience, practice, but maybe not.
Yeah, so The Nothing Man was an exception. The worst one to plot was Easily Rewind, because it was told completely out of order with multiple points of view. So that's why I needed a color-coded Excel spreadsheet. But what I would say to people, like something I've definitely had to learn, is that the writing happens when you're actually writing the book. So you can do as much plotting in advance as you want and all that, but the real work happens when you actually sit down and start writing. And we all have to remember that when we pick up a book and we read it and we think it's amazing, that is not what came out in the writer's computer day one. That is multiple drafts, editorial advice, fixing the fact someone was pregnant for 7 months or whatever. Like, we have to acknowledge that it's a journey, and not a sort of, it comes out like that. Perfect. As Hemingway said, the first draft of anything is horse feces.
And needs a bit of work, indeed.
Yeah.
Just in terms of your writing day, obviously there's a procrastination issue within probably every writing day. How many hours are you looking at? How many words do you aim to write? Do you have goals?
I have goals, and the goal is to become someone who has a writing day. I'm absolutely terrible, and this is why we are here up against yet another deadline. So the problem is that, like, I start work at a very specific point, right? And it's true of all procrastinators. So I start work at the exact moment where the fear of writing something terrible is overtaken by the fear of not writing anything at all in time for my deadline. So if you give me a year to write a book, like, I will spend somewhere between 9 and 10 months of that not doing it. I'll be thinking about it.
Yeah, plotting.
I might write like a few thousand words, but I won't actually begin until I feel that I really have to do it. So my writing day mostly involves not writing. I like to give my rewards up front. So if I'm like, okay, when I get to 10,000, this is how my brain works. If I said to myself, okay, there's a new show on Netflix that I really want to watch, and I will watch it once I hit 10,000 words. The way my brain works is I say to myself, I may as well watch it now, because I'm only going to distract myself thinking about watching it. And if I watch it, then I'm clear and, I'm focused on the book and blah, blah. So you can see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a writing day. I have a writing panic, which is what I'm in right now. So for the last since Dublin went to level 3 the week before last, and I went back because I was down in Cork for a while, I am literally just getting up, writing, eating, writing, and then sleeping at night, and that's all I'm doing. So I'm probably at risk for like deep vein thrombosis at this stage, because I'm writing like 7 or 8 hours a day, because that's just how I work. And you know, I fought it for a long time, but maybe this is just,
that's how your mind works. I mean, lots of journalists work really well with deadlines, don't they? And they work much better. If you don't give them a deadline, there's no chance of you ever seeing anything. But you give them even an artificial one, that they'll get it done. We will have to do this if Sarah's watching. We'll have to just say, all she needs to do is give you a deadline 6 months before the book's due, and everything will be fine.
you know, I tried that with my previous editor, but I knew she was lying. So
So it failed completely.
there's no point in me fake deadlines. I will say my goal, honestly, and I'm not just saying that in case our shared editor is watching, but my goal is to get ahead of myself in the next 12 months, because the world is perfect for hiding away and writing right now. And you see, what I normally do is, like, when I deliver this first draft, which I absolutely will do on Monday, when I deliver it, normally what I do is I'm like spent. So I'm just like, okay, I'm on holiday now. I'm going to read all the books and watch all the shows. And I don't really do anything until my edits come back, which is a few weeks later. But what I really want to start doing, and what I think I should be doing, is using that time to start on the next book and have 2 things. Because I'm quite like monogamous with my ideas. Like, I only ever work on one thing at a time. And I just don't think that's going to get me to where I want to go. So I need to start, like, actually doing some work.
Yeah. And you do have a really big contract with the Americans, don't you? So your American contract is multiple books. So have you got all those deadlines written in stone?
Yeah, 6 books. So this book that I'm about to deliver is the first of those 6. So
No pressure.
Let's not even talk about it.
No, we won't go there. Okay. It's absolutely fascinating. When you're having your blitz days, how many words are we talking?
The greatest day I ever had was in New York, actually, and I managed to take a nap in the middle of it, and I wrote 10,000 words.
Awesome.
But I've only ever done it once, and I've tried so many times to like go back and recreate it. A really good blitz day for me is probably 6,000 or 7,000 words. But what I find is you should aim for more. I always end up doing about half of what I aim for. So like, if I sit down and say I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, I will write nothing really. But if I say, okay, I'm going to write 6,000 today, I'll probably get 3,000 done. And I need to write enough to feel like some sort of forward progress.
Yeah, there's pressure. That's what you need, basically, in your life. You just need
writing a thriller, and you want people to feel like a motion and a speed. And if you are spending 6 weeks writing a scene that only takes 2 or 3 minutes in the timeline of the book, I think it's very hard to judge the pace. So I always think like the first draft is me telling the story to myself and also trying to read it like a reader. So the quicker I can write, the easier it is, I think, to do.
I think that's a really, really good point, particularly for the first draft for a thriller, because at the end of the day, you want to hope that your reader is going to sit down and start the book and just be carried right the way through, and you get that momentum if you're writing at that type of pace, don't you? I think.
Yeah.
Rather than
Can I just say as well, Vanessa? I just spot that Lucy is asking how did I finish my first book? I'll tell you how. Okay, but this is do what I say, not do what I did.
Right? Yeah.
Do not do this. But this is what I did. So there was no way I was ever going to finish it without a deadline. That was just never going to happen. So I sent what I had to an agent, and I pretended I had finished the book. And I thought that the fear of her coming back to me to say, send me the full manuscript, would spur me on to finish the book, because agents take ages to come back and blah, blah, blah. She did take ages to come back. She did ask for the full manuscript. I hadn't finished it because that wasn't enough. So I told her I was going on holidays and I just wanted one more read over it before.
You big fibber.
And then I wrote 50,000 words in 2 weeks. So don't do that, because she said no. Of course she did, because she's not going to say yes to a book I wrote like that, but that's how I finished it.
Yeah, just by the skin of your teeth, literally. Dear me, goodness me. My internet is just starting to shake a tiny bit, so I'm going to bring Simon in. I'm just going to get rid of this, and then we can look at some of those questions because there's some good ones.
I just happened to spot that one, and I was
no, you're right. It's good. It's great. There's some great ones coming up the
Hi.
side. There he is, and he can. Hi, Sam. You can have a look at some of those questions too. I think Catherine's writing process is really interesting in relation to some of the other people we've talked to, and she's completely different. I think what's really interesting when you look back at the whole series of these different things that we've been talking to people is that everybody actually produces the same thing. They produce a book. They do it, but they do it in so many different ways. We're actually all still doing the same thing, but their approaches are so different that it's really interesting for people to try and, cherry pick the bits that might work for them. Can you see anything there, Simon, that's jumping out at you?
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up, I think I was just sitting here listening to this fantastic conversation, was slightly shocked by the fact I was being brought back into it. But I think that's no, I think there's such great warmth between the two of you, and I think you can just sense everybody's going, wow, this is amazing, and I'm going to go back to my book right now. Something I wanted to ask, I love this notion that you're basically rewarding yourself for something you haven't yet done. Were you the kid who had the ice cream before they had the Brussels sprouts? Was that the idea?
Not that I was ever eating Brussels sprouts, but yeah, well,
there we go. You should have done.
I would have delayed gratification. No, I'm just such a sabotager. Like I know intellectually what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I still do it. And like I said, I did fight this. Like I thought, like I write full time. I don't even have a goldfish. Like I have nothing else to worry about except writing my book.
You've got very neat bookshelves though, so they're good displacement activity, aren't they?
Exactly. These are newly color coded because my deadline is coming up. So this is quite typical. Like, my house has never been as organized as it is now.
Spotless, your apartment.
God bless. I have just stopped fighting it. I just think, like, as Vanessa said, we all get there in the end.
Yeah.
And whatever works for you is the way to do it. Would I like to do this with a lot less stress? I often wonder, like, what kind of book would I produce if I gave myself more time to do it?
Yeah.
Less coffee.
Without sounding like a jerk, like, it's doing okay writing like this. So I'm just going to keep rewarding myself with Netflix before I start. I just for example, yesterday, there's a new thing on Netflix about the Shannon Watts murder. And I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write all day and then I'm going to sit down and I can watch it without feeling, like I shouldn't be. But instead I watched it at 11 a.m. and then I went and did my writing. So, but I did do my writing in fairness. So.
There's something else I wanted to ask you. Clearly, your work, because of the high concepts and the quality of the writing, obviously attracts interest from other media like TV, film, and whatever. And I just wondered, does that have any effect on you as a writer? Obviously, the first book, the aim was to get published. Yeah. As one becomes more and more ambitious as a writer, quite clearly one wants world domination. Who doesn't as a writer? And one way of doing that is that, you want people to be thinking, oh, there's a new Catherine Ryan Howard show on Netflix tonight.
Yeah.
Does that affect how you write? Do you try and write? Do you now write in a kind of, this would look good on telly kind of way or not?
It's really funny because I can't say anything yet, but I have big news coming down the line about The Nothing Man. That's all I can say. But when I was writing that book, and also when I heard people were interested in doing something with it, I couldn't understand because I was like, the book that only works as a book. Like, that's the whole point of it, is that he is reading the book and you are reading the book, and yet this is the one that has attracted the most interest from the mediums. So for 5 minutes after that, I was just about to start writing the book I'm writing now. It crossed my mind, no one's really interested in this for TV or whatever. And then I stopped myself because I remembered that never entered my head for either of the books. Rewind is optioned by Clarkenwell. It just never entered my mind. You cannot write to fit that kind of thing because it's a fallacy, because the book that I thought could not be translated into anything else is the one that attracted the most attention for that. My job is to write novels, and all I can do is do that to the best of my ability. And everything else, it's not what I was thinking about. It's not what I wanted when I was a little girl, imagining walking into a bookshop, seeing my book on the shelf. It's all bonus stuff. I am so excited about it. I so appreciate it. And I know I'm very lucky, but it's not what I think about when I sit down at my desk after watching Netflix at 11 o'clock.
So I'm interested in reviews. I mean, obviously the first review you have is when the editor reads the book and then comes back. Are you interested in what people say after that? Are you kind of one of those pressing F5 on Amazon constantly if you're having a good day?
I have weaned myself off Amazon and Goodreads because they're not a place an author should go.
They're not.
The reviews on Amazon and Goodreads are product, especially on Amazon, they're product reviews. They are, you can just as easily find someone who loves or hates your book as you can find somebody who gives it 1 star because it arrived late.
Yeah.
They don't mean anything to me. Goodreads, I think. I genuinely think there are people in there who love books and want to help promote them, but there is an attitude on Goodreads sometimes that I just cannot abide by. I get a lot of reviews. I think women more so than men get this, where reviewers don't review the book. They say, you know, what I should have done what I should have been thinking. And they're not reviews in the sense of reviews you see in the newspapers, which are, you know, they have a bit of objectivity. They are people who are professional reviewers of books, who don't let personal things get in the way, who don't say things like, you know, I remember once I had a review for The Liar's Girl where it said I didn't want to offend anyone. Like, it was clear I didn't want to offend anyone. And I was like, what are you even talking about? So I do read reviews in newspapers and stuff, and I have been really lucky with those so far. But Amazon and Goodreads is not a place where authors should be, I feel. Amazon and Goodreads are for other users of Amazon and Goodreads. And it just doesn't do you any good because, of course, we forget all the good ones and we remember verbatim the lines from the bad ones.
Okay, there's another, just jumping around, there's another question from Lucy. So did you write the book inside the book? It's about the Nothing Man first. And then write the parts where the serial killer read it, or did you write both in parallel? Really good question.
I mostly wrote the true crime memoir first because I had to kind of establish like what he had done, and you know, get all that sort of lockdown. And then the easy bit, and remember I said I had a 10,000 word day. This was how. The easy bit was going back and slotting in his reading and his reactions and stuff like that. So I mostly wrote the memoir part first.
In terms of influences when you're writing, do you kind of stop reading other people's work when you're writing, or do you have a kind of, you know, 'cause there's always that concern, isn't there? You write something that you read last week without thinking about it. I'm
totally paranoid about that, and I think it can so easily happen without any, you know, intention on your part.
Totally.
So I generally don't read novels while I'm writing. If there is a proof that, like, you know, like Vanessa's sending me her proof, I believe. Anyway.
Should be there this morning or tomorrow.
All our parcels go to the office and I'm super lazy, so it's probably there right now. I'll get it.
There already. Yeah.
But like, I would read that because, you know, it's a friend and it's a priority, but otherwise I wouldn't read novels. I would stick to nonfiction because I am worried about this accidental transference. Definitely.
In the last sort of 18 weeks of doing this, we talk about film a lot because, you know, we're all influenced by structure. And Woody Allen is someone that I remember saying at some point that he had more films in his head that he knew than he could ever make. Even if he lived to be 100, he was never going to have time to make them all. Have you got is there a kind of air traffic control in your head with all these high concept plots sort of in a holding pattern waiting to land, or is it very much one at a time?
Well, now I have 2 reasons not to like Woody Allen. I don't have any. I have the idea I'm working on, and I have a fog, a mist of the next idea, and that's I don't understand. I think Vanessa is one of them. I don't understand these writers who are like, I have so many ideas. I don't know which one to. What? Give me some, because I am strictly like one at a time. I'm not like that at all. I mean, you know, after Rewind, I was actually, well, sort of in the first draft, let's say, of Rewind, I was really worried because I didn't have another idea. And
Right.
then The Nothing Man came along at the start of this year. I started writing a novel that I knew in my bones, like, was not, the idea wasn't there, but I started it anyway. As luck would have it, a better idea came along and I ditched it and I swapped over. But I'm absolutely not, like, I have the book I'm working on now and I know what I'm going to write next. And honestly, I couldn't even pretend to come up with an idea after that. I just have to trust that by the time it comes around, I will have thought of something.
So can you?
It's a risky game, but like.
So on that basis, you can't imagine writing a sort of series of books about the same character?
No, like, I love reading series, but like writing them has just never appealed to me. I don't know why. I just, like, my favorite crime writer is Michael Connelly. You know, I could never see myself like doing that. I just like the challenge, I think, of a completely blank slate every time. I also like the fact that I'm not under any obligation to carry on something or to continue something that I started in the last book. I definitely am in the standalone world. I think I can't see myself doing. I might bring some characters back, and there's a couple of callbacks in The Nothing Man to previous.
That's nice.
Like, what I like to think is that I am creating a fictional universe. So in The Nothing Man, there was in Ireland, in The Nothing Man, there was the Canal Killer, who was from The Liar's Girl, and someone lives in Shannamora, which is the fictional town from Rewind. But beyond that, each thing is very much a separate, like, start from the beginning sort of thing.
I think people are interested in about your relationship with your characters, and I know, I think when we interviewed Carmel Harrington, which was a long time ago, she talked about, she almost, I mean, you know her well, of course, but, you know, she has this kind of process of almost a kind of questionnaire, and she knows everything about what her characters do. Adele Parks, I think, was similar. We had a, and actually, in fact, Sophie Hannah had a very different attitude to characters. Sophie was basically saying,
I'm sort of laughing at her because I am not like that, and Vanessa knows what I'm going to say. I don't feel like that. I don't work like that. I mean,
you come from the Sophie Hannah school, actually, of the like characters.
Well, Sophie's attitude was, I write a plot, and the characters bloody well do what I tell them to do, and they get dragged through because they're there to execute plot points.
I mean, I used to joke, I don't want to be mean to anyone, but I used to joke that, like, when writers say my character surprised me, I was like, well, you should see someone about that, because you are typing, you are making them do whatever they're doing. But a friend was saying to me, who like couldn't understand this, she was saying, like, so if I put one of your characters in a situation that's not in the book, like, what do you see in your head? And I said, I see, like, you know, like a scene from Tron, but like nothing's happening. So it's just a blackness. They're just standing in like a black abyss because they don't exist outside of the novel for me. Like, I you know, obviously I love Carmel, and she writes these amazing, like, emotionally powerful stories. I'm not saying I don't have emotion in mine. I think I do. I definitely made at least one person cry at the end of The Nothing Man. But, you know, they exist on the page for me. Like, this is a craft. It's a job. It's a physical thing. I don't go in for any sort of romanticism or uncovering things in creative ether or anything like that. Like, I am making stuff up. I have a different mug today, but my normal mug says, make shit up. And that's what I do, and I don't add any sort of airs and graces to it. Like, you know, that's sorry.
No, I mean, it's surprising me. It sounds quite transactional, that, but clearly, you know, you're very, very professional at what you do, and, you know, quite clearly, you know, ultimately there is a book, as you say, and people get there in a different way, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. So whatever ends up creating that book for you. And like the other thing is that, and I've tried to explain this to Vanessa, we've had so many conversations about this, like on panels and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that I write a plot and then I get sort of Lego figures and I put them in and I move them around. It's as if the plot comes to me with the people that the plot is going to happen to. Like, I don't separate them as such. So, you know, I did a screenwriting course a couple of years back where, you know, they talked about your main character being like basically the worst prepared person for whatever is going to happen to them. Like, there's no point having, you know, a maths genius who has to figure out an equation to diffuse a bomb. Like, you need someone who can't add Scrabble scores, i.e. me, and who would have to do that. So for me, plot and character cannot be separated. They come together. But at the same time, I would never, you know, interview them. I would never write a bio. And if they are outside of the book, they don't exist. That's kind of my philosophy.
It's really, really interesting. It's really interesting to see how different people approach it, isn't it? And I think that is the thing for everybody, that there's no wrong way. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of right ways, but there's no wrong way to do it.
And I think it's fascinating to talk about. Like, I love hearing, if we all did it the same way, how boring would it be, honestly.
Yeah. There's something about creativity.
We've got a question here from Ita, who is a very loyal follower of the show. She wants to know what books influence you the most. Well, you've mentioned Michael Connelly. Jurassic Park and Michael Connelly.
She's queen of Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park, honestly, like, if I had a religion, it would be that.
They're making a new one at the moment, aren't they? Jurassic Kingdom.
Yeah. But we won't talk about the new ones because I have things to say. But I read Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton when I was, for the first time when I was 11. I had to skip a lot of the genetic and chaos theory bits, but I was, and people think I'm joking, but like, it's such an amazing book. And I'm still not over the fact that someone, like, because now we're all really familiar, like Jurassic Park is a major part of the culture and, you know, we all know what it's about, but imagine hearing for the first time that someone has written an adventure in which dinosaurs are brought back and put on an island and turned into a theme park. Like, it blew my mind that someone had come up with that idea, and more so that it was his job. It was his job to sit at home and come up with those ideas. So for me, you know, I can see a lot now of parallels with what I do with, even with The Nothing Man, for instance. Jurassic Park starts with an article that leads you to sort of believe the science is rooted in reality. And I reread it every year. I just love it. The one thing I would say, if this place goes up in flames, is my first edition with Chip Kidd's iconic design on the front. Like, I just love it. And I don't really think of influence in terms of style or career or things like that. I just think of feeling. I want to make people feel like I do when I read books like Jurassic Park, which is totally inside the book, glued to the couch or the sun lounger or whatever it is, and just thinking, I can't believe someone made this from nothing. Like, this is why I love books and I love stories, because, you know, I did say earlier that it's a job and everything else, but as a reader, you know, they are a kind of magic, because they are entire worlds built from nothing. And that's, in terms of influence, that's what I think about. I think of making someone feel like a friend said to me, like, what's the best thing that ever happened to you in your career? And honestly, up there in the top 10 was a tweet from someone who said, you know, I've been on the couch all day with your book. Thank you for those hours of reading. Like, that just broke my heart, because that's exactly what I'm aiming for as an author. Also, I want a job where you can watch Netflix in the morning, but I do also want to make people feel that way.
No, it's fantastic. Really interesting.
I was going to just ask a question about dialogue, because I know Adele talked about how every evening she would read what she'd written during the day to her husband, and it was a good way, if something didn't sound real, then she had to go back. What do you do about, do you find dialogue challenging, or is that
I love dialogue, and I actually think I'm pretty good at it. It's one of the things I never get in trouble over. Like, I never get a note on my dialogue. I hear it. I just hear it in my head. And rhythm, I think, is super important.
Yeah.
So I write it and then I read it back. I'd never really read aloud because I'd have no voice. Like, you can't, 100,000 words read aloud. But I hear it in my head. And the rhythm of the conversation is incredibly important to me. And I just think, like, it's, you either have an ear for it or you don't. And I think a lot of beginning writers sort of, I see Will is challenging me to Jurassic Park quiz.
Yeah,
good
he is.
luck, Will. Good luck. I just hear it in my head and I don't transcribe. Like, it's the same with research, which is another thing Vanessa and I have talked about a lot. I don't think that I have a duty to reality, in the sense that if crime novels really were realistic in terms of investigations, criminal investigations, they would just be hours and hours of people sitting at computers or talking on the phone.
Yeah.
And so your dialogue is not verbatim a conversation that happened. It is just, it has to feel real on the page, and the rhythm and being careful with your he exclaimed, she laughed, blah, 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 just stick to said as much as you can is the way to do it. So I don't read it out loud, but I do hear it in my head.
Brilliant. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think it makes a huge difference, and it's that the whole thing about you're using dialogue to move the story forwards, as opposed to writing the conversation that might be had. Because if we take two cops in the room who are coming in the morning, by the time they finish having the conversation about who's making the coffee and who's bought donuts, you've lost the reader. So it's really, your dialogue is very punchy. It's very much focused on plot. And everything you're saying here is bringing us back to plot, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's definitely moving the story forward from that perspective. Mark earlier was just asking what brought you to crime in the first place. It's being a lovely girl.
Crime fiction. Yeah, I just love it. It's what I love to read. I think, like, when I was very young, I was reading Nancy Drew and Christopher Pike, which is kind of horror but has a bit of a crime element. And there's a part in The Nothing Man, which is based on my own childhood, where we had a video shop like 5 minutes from my house, and I'm the eldest, so no supervision, could do what I want. They were just like, let's see if she survives, and then we'll talk about discipline after that. So when I was like at my 10th birthday party, and I will swear on the Bible this is true, I have witnesses, we watched Victim of Beauty, the Dawn Smith story, which was a made-for-TV American movie about a girl who was murdered, kidnapped at gunpoint, raped and murdered, and then the killer started ringing her sister, who was in beauty practice. I swear to God. And the funniest thing was, one of my friends had already seen it. This was actually
what's going on in Cork.
Yeah, that. So I went from watching those, like when I was 11 or 12, I knew all about like Ted Bundy, Menendez brothers, like Diane Downs, Amy Fisher, all these stories, which I think, had no effect on me because Ireland didn't deal with things like that at the time. Obviously, when we got into the later 90s, we had the missing women and Sophie Toscana-Plantier and stuff. I went from there reading crime fiction. I started with Patricia Cornwell. She was my gateway drug. And then I went into Michael Connelly and Tana French. And I just love it. I think crime fiction offers something to readers that other genres don't. And I love the puzzle, and I love the glimpse of the darkness, and I just love the pace and the ferocity of them as well. So it's just what I love to read, and I'm obsessed with true crime as well. So it's not just it's all killers all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. I think it's that puzzle, isn't it? And it's the challenge that when you're reading a book, it's not just laid out there on the page. There's something you don't expect. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but you've got a big, very controversial theory on twists, haven't you?
Oh, that we're over them?
Yeah. So just give us your
I'm so
take on twists.
So I have major twist fatigue. Right. I presume this is what you mean, Vanessa, that
Yeah. Your theory on it, yeah.
So The Nothing Man opens with the identity of the killer, because I'm just as a reader, there is way too many crime novels and thrillers out there now that are all resting on the twist. And the twist comes and you're like, okay, yay or nay, but there's not much to the book beyond that. So the book is almost like a bus ride to the twist, and it doesn't matter what you see on the way. Like, you know, it doesn't seem to be a factor. And the problem with that is that, you know, every page should be keeping the reader turning the pages. And if the twist isn't good, the whole book is. This is why I avoid Amazon and Goodreads, because if they see the twist coming, or they don't like the twist, the entire book is rubbished. You know, it's not a good book to them. And so I purposefully went out with The Nothing Man with no twist. There is a small reveal.
There is. It's a bit of a twist. It's a bit of a twist right at the end. I love that bit.
The book doesn't count on you liking it or not, or seeing it coming or not. And that's, you know, what I'm hoping. Now, having said all this, the book I'm working on right now does have hopefully a good twist. But I just think we need to stop using it as a measurement of whether or not a book is good, because what else can we possibly do? Like, I remember reading Gone Girl, Claire McIntosh's I Let You Go, you know, Defending Jacob, which I think has one of the best twists I've ever read in crime fiction. Even things like We Need to Talk About Kevin. But there's only so many of those moments, I think, to be, you know, that you can create. Like, I just don't see how we can keep one-upping each other with twists. And we'd be better off trying to write great books that work chapter to chapter and don't rely on the twist.
Yeah, I think it comes down to plotting though, doesn't it, in a really good story? Because if the whole book, I actually do tentatively agree with you, although I love twists because I like to be surprised by a book.
I love it too, but like,
if your whole book is based, you're actually dead right, because if your whole book is based purely on the twist, then you're right, it's just about getting to that point.
And more I hear readers say, like, I just kept going to see what the twist was.
Yeah, and that's not about reading. They're not appreciating the book. It was really, Jeffrey Deaver was really interesting last year when we talked to him, Midsummer Murder One.
I heard them.
You were, and he was talking about having 3 twists. So he has the one twist that he knows you're going to get. He has the twist that if you're really super sharp, you might get, and then the twist that you're never going to get. And I love that sense of the fact that now he's not working towards the twist because it's in there, but he's really thought about his reader. Obviously, he's had a bit of practice at this stage. So
he wrote like 90-page outlines. Who has the time?
I know. Well, that's like Sophie Hannah's got a Nocky thing, isn't it? Where she's effectively writing a massive treatment, which is really a first draft.
I think I might try that next time. I think because I have done some outlines for screenplays just on courses and stuff. And I think that's what I might try next time, is to actually do an outline, to actually tell the book in about 10 pages. And we'll see how that works out. But
here's 100. There's a flaw in your plan. But it's fine. No, I think it's a good idea. I think it really certainly gets the plot down, doesn't it? So you know where you're going.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating hearing about everybody's different interpretations. Are you allowed to tell us what the next book's about?
Yep. So yeah, it's it's lockdown. So I'm sort of nervous about telling people that, because at the start of this issue, we all thought, you know, it'll be over soon and no one in a year's time is going to want to read a novel set in lockdown. Like, we just don't want to be reminded of it. But I always set my books in the current year, and I try to make them as realistic as possible. And I just felt like I couldn't ignore this. And also I had a great idea for, well, what I think is a great idea for a couple who, basically the Deputy Health Minister in the UK said that if you were a new couple, you should either break up or move in together because households couldn't mix during lockdown. I'd always had in the back of my head an idea about a couple who meet and fall in love, but things are not as they seem. I had no plot to go with it, but when I heard that, I was like, there we go. So I'm writing about a couple who move in together, barely know each other. It's just a new relationship has begun, and they are locked down in Dublin, as I was. So I started this book while I myself was locked down in Dublin city centre, as they are. And it's
Yeah, it's a mystery. We'll see what happens. Yeah, we won't tell.
There are no twists at all.
There is a twist.
There is a twist. Yeah, there is a twist. Yeah, there is.
Hopefully there will
be good.
But the whole novel will not depend on that twist being good.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
Well,
That's
what a
fantastic.
fabulous session that's been, hasn't it?
That's been great, hasn't it? It's really, really, really
brilliant.
interesting.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you. So the Nothing Man is out now, and the buy links are in the comments, guys. So you can just click on that. And also Catherine's social media. So if you want to follow her, particularly her Instagram page is pretty cool, because Catherine's a bit of a social media leader, because she got there before any of us. So she understood it. It's mainly because I think because of the self-publishing background, wasn't it, that you had to get out there. And so her Instagram's pretty cool. So have a look at that too. So thank you very, very much indeed. We've got some exciting people coming up. If people keep an eye on the Facebook page, they will find out some of the names of the authors we have coming through for the writing game. Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That's a brilliant introduction.
Very much.
I'm going to say that introduction when I'm feeling like, things aren't going well.
Yeah, just call me or watch it again on YouTube. It's fine. It's all right.
Exactly. We'll get loads more views. It'd be great. It'd be great.
Yeah,
listen, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for your great questions, guys. And we'll see you all next week.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.